Well, a very warm welcome to you. Hello, guys. My name is Cassim, and welcome to another episode of Journal Entries. Firstly, want to start off by thanking you very much for taking the time to watch and listen to me. I want to thank you so much for whatever it is that you're doing, for taking the time to listen to me share some of my philosophies, listen to me share some of the things that I believe, some of the things that I kind of stand for. And I'm hoping that today something that I share with you can help you to become a higher, fuller expression of yourself. So there's three things that I want to share with you today for my journals, things that I've been thinking about. The three things that I want to talk to you about is number one of which you've already seen in the title of today, which is I want to talk to you about the fact that you can live with people who don't see you. You can live with people who don't know who you are. You can live with people who don't know what your needs are, who don't know what your dreams are, who don't know what your fears are. The second thing that I want to talk to you about is to realize that if the grass is not greener, turn around. If the grass isn't better on the other end, if the plan you've bought into isn't good, turn around, go in a different direction. And the third thing that I want to talk to you about is I want to talk to you about breaking a cycle or a curse in your family. Because every single one of us has family curses. Every single one of us has cycles and in our lives, and we have patterns in our lives that have been passed on from generation to generation. And for many of us, they're not benefiting us anymore. They are not of use. So I want to talk to you about that as well. First things first, I want to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel Cassim on YouTube. If you want to support me, if you want to join my community, I'd really appreciate that. Secondly, in case you've never heard me talk about journal entries or you've never watched journal entries, let me tell you a little bit about why I started it. I started it because I basically believe that in order for a man to be successful, or certainly to call himself a success, he has to get to the point where he has somebody who is his successor. In other words, I believe that if you die and everything that you've learned, everything that you've acquired, everything that you've experienced dies with you, then as far as I'm concerned, you cannot call yourself a success. You are in fact a failure because you haven't in any way passed any of the things that you've learned to the next generation so that they can have even better lives than you have. And I think that's really the essence of life. Isn't really the essence of life to ensure that our kids, our nephews, our godchildren have better lives than the ones that we did? I mean, you may disagree with me, but I believe as Cassim that is really the essence of life. To ensure that we allow the next generation to reach heights that we couldn't even dare imagine possible. And that's why I wanted to start it, because I realize a lot of you guys are not rich, you're not in positions of power, you're not some multi-million billion rich person who's going to have loads of properties to pass on to your children. You're not in positions where you can maneuver and send them to some of the best schools in the world. You just are not in those positions. But every single one of you who's listening to me, you have experience. You can't deny you don't have experience because you've lived quite a fair bit. You have knowledge. You're not dumb. You have acquired certain skills as a mother, skills at listening, communication, different skills that you've acquired in your life. And what I believe is that your job is to use these journals to refine these philosophies and these tactics and these experiences so that you can choose somebody who you can pass them on to. Essentially what I believe is that you should take all of those ideas and philosophies and tactics and strategies and give them to somebody else so that they can have a head start on in life. So that's really why I wanted to start journal entries. But let's get into what I want to talk to you about today, and then hopefully some of the things that I share with you today should inspire you in some way to start your own journal entries, even in case you've never started them, even though you've watched a few of these. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk to you about is about the fact that you can live with people, but those people don't necessarily see you. You know, so many of us in life go through life believing that and having the assumption that if people know us, if we are familiar with people, then those people know what is best for us. And that assumption is essentially how I lived the first kind of 24 years of my life. Because I always believed, look, if the education system is really that bad, my mum would know about it. And my mum would not encourage me to go through the education system. If goal setting was really as important as what people say, everybody would know about goal setting. Everybody around me would be talking about goal setting. The schools would be teaching it. The government would be recommending it. My dad would be talking to me about it. If goal setting was really that important, I would know about it by now. I mean, I would not have gone through high school, college, right? Gone into multiple workplaces, and not a single one of those ever emphasized the importance of having my own goals in my own life. And if none of those places ever emphasize that, surely it can't be that important. And that's the assumption that I made. Until I came to one of the big lessons in my life, which was that people can only take you as far as what they've been. Your parents can be sincere and they can absolutely love you and they can want the best for you, but they may not be able to see your potential. Because the reality of life is that we see people as we see ourselves. In other words, if you tell me that you want to become a millionaire, I will think about myself, and if I can become a millionaire, I will think about all the other people who've become millionaires who I know, and which for most of us is no one. And then I will make, very, very quickly in my head, I will come up with a decision based on all of that as to whether you can become a millionaire or not. And, I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and I was explaining to him that, one of the biggest obstacles that a lot of people have today is that a lot of people today, we live in a evidence-based society. We live in a world where everybody has to have proof of everything. And that's not all, if you go back throughout history, that's not the way that things have always worked. People have had faith. People have believed in things that they can't necessarily see. And what I would encourage many of you to do is to begin to activate faith, is to begin to activate instinct and gut feeling in your lives. Because many of the abundance and the frugality and the winning, many of the great things of life do not come from having the answers directly in front of you, having evidence of stuff. Some people, I've had the pleasure of being able to interview loads of people who've been married for 15 years or more. And one of the things that absolutely fascinates me is that a lot of people who've been married for 40, 50 years, whenever I ask them, what's your secret? How have you managed to do this? A lot of the time, they will say to me, well, Cassim, at the beginning, do you know what? We weren't sure that we were going to make it. We weren't even sure that we were right for each other, but we trusted our gut. We trusted that the person was right for us, and we committed and put ourselves in it, right? And what I would share with you is many of you guys, you are relying on the evidence of your parents, you're relying on the evidence of your friends, you're relying on the evidence of your colleagues, people who are known to you to dictate to you what you can do in your life. And I'm here to say to you that unfortunately, from what I have found, according to my research and observing my own life, the people closest to you are actually one of the biggest obstacles to you becoming your highest, fullest expression of yourself, because they know you. It's funny, I had a friend of mine who had been like a player. He was a player for most of his sort of adolescent kind of teenage years, in his early 20s. And he got to the point where he was like, do you know what, Cass? I really like this girl. Right, and this guy would be playing multiple girls at the same time, and the girls would even know, and they would be fighting each other over him, right? And he got to the point where he was like, do you know what, Kaz? There's just one girl, man. I like this girl. I don't know what's happened to me, Kaz. I don't even know what to say, man, but I really like her. But there is another girl that I really like, and I don't know whether I should go for her, or I should commit to this one girl. And I remember many of my friends saying, bro, it's never going to work. We know what you're like. Even if you commit to the relationship, you're probably going to cheat on her. And I said to him, look, man, give it a go. The worst case scenario that happens is you give it a go, she breaks your heart, or you figure out, I don't know, 5-6 months in or 5-6 years later that she isn't the one for you. Base case scenario is you've just found one of the greatest things that people seek in their life, which is the one. You found somebody who you connect with. You found somebody who loves you for who you are and accepts you even in spite of all the way that you were before. Not many people ever get to experience that in their life. Now, they have been together, I think, like 6 years now. But what I'm saying to you is, had he listened to some of our other friends who knew him, right? They knew him. They knew the way he was. He would never have gone ahead with it. He would have been talked out of this great abundance and this great relationship because of the way he was before. And so I would just encourage you, not just in the area of relationships, not just in the area of your health, in area of your career, but in all the areas of your life. Really be very careful about the people particularly who know you and what they're defining for you, what they're telling you is possible for you. Because sincerity is not a test of truth. Just because someone is sincere, it doesn't mean that they know what is best for you. You know, I think I did a journal entries where I shared with you guys that one of the things that I shared was, just because something has worked for somebody, it doesn't guarantee that it's going to work for you. You know, I can share with you guys about goal setting. I can share with you some philosophies and principles and tactics that have worked for me, that have worked for hundreds of people. But it doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. You've got to tailor it to your life. You've got to look at your life and say, does this work for me? Does this fit? Does it feel right? Does this connect with me? And make your own decision. So that's one of the first things that I wanted to share with you. Be very careful that the people who you live with do not fall into the trap of thinking that they've seen you just because they're with you. You know, just to give you one last point on this, if you don't believe me, speak to somebody who's been divorced, right? Because one of the things that this is part of the reason why I learned this lesson, because I would speak to people who were divorced or people who had separated or who had split up with somebody, and I'd ask him, tell me what led up to the breakup of the relationship or the breakup of the marriage. I'm really interested. And so many times I would hear people talking about, well, Cassim, you know, we lived in the same house, but we weren't connected. We lived in the same house, but we didn't know each other. And I was like, what do you mean? How can you live in the same house as somebody and somebody not know who you are? That sounds ridiculous, right? But there is a kind of an energy, a force that I think connects people when we have the same intentions, when we have the same needs, when we have the same desires, when we have the same intentions. There is a force that kind of links everything in our lives. And so I would, you know, just to finish this point off, I would really encourage you, because it's something that I've been thinking about, to really be very careful about being around people who know you but don't see you truly for who you are, right? Some of you may have people in your lives who see you as weak, but actually you have a strength, you have a rooting which is much stronger than what a lot of people are making you out to be. I don't know, just something for you guys to think about that I was journaling about. The second thing that I wanted to talk to you about is about if you realize that the grass isn't greener, turn around and go back. You know, let me tell you a bit of a story. So about 3 years ago, I was done footing driving for the second time. When I was done footing driving for the second time, there was I guess, two things that happened that kind of really were quite defining moments for me. So on the day that I went up to the court, so I went up to the magistrate's court in Reading, where I live. And when I went up to the magistrate's court, I was sat there. I'd arrived at like 9 o'clock or something, and I was waiting to be. I waited about an hour to go into the magistrate's court for my case to be heard. And as I waited for about an hour, I would see people come in and out of the magistrate's court. And one of the things that really kind of threw me is the people who worked in a magistrate's court would know the people coming in and out of the court by name. And that really threw me, because I was like, how could the court, or the people who work in the court, the magistrate's court, know these individuals by their names? Because they didn't know me by my name, right? They called me sir, or they called me Mr. Kawesa. So I was like, how could they possibly know these people by their names? And what I basically discovered was that those people had been in and out of the magistrate's court, whether it be for stealing, whether it be for youth crimes, or youth prison, or whatever. They'd been in and out of that system so much that they'd become regulars. The second thing that happened was when I got into the magistrate's court, the woman who was sentencing me, she said to me, "Look, Mr. Kawesa, I've looked over your files. It's evident to me that you don't really belong here." She said to me, "You don't have any previous records. You don't have a history of committing crimes. We've never heard of you. We've never seen you. We've had multiple references from people who know you and have told us that you are clearly a good person, that you've got good morals, and you're a good human being. So it's obviously obvious that you don't belong here." And the lady said to me, "I am going to give you the harshest sentence possible because I want to ensure that you never come back here." She said, "This is your opportunity, Mr. Kawesa, to ensure that you never return here. Many people in this court come in here and I see them all the time." And it was fascinating for me because before I went into the court, the person who was in there before me, it's almost funny actually, the person who was in there before me had breached their license because they were due to do community service, but they didn't turn up to the community service so many times that they were called back into the court to then extend their time. And she said to me, "You were in the room when you saw the guy we've just sentenced. A lot of these guys don't care about their lives. Use this opportunity to ensure that you never come back here." And basically what I learned from, because I was reminiscing about this, looking through my journals, and I was really thinking about this. And one of the things that I came to realize that day was that basically the path that I was on was no good. I had chosen a life which was leading me in a certain direction, which was leading me on a path where I was either going to end up dead or I was going to end up in prison. Because she said to me, she said, "Cassim, Mr. Kawesa, if you get arrested again, you will end up in prison or something to the equivalent of prison. You will have a criminal record," well, I already have a criminal record, but my point being is, she said that you will be classified then as somebody on our radar and as somebody who is a criminal, and you're not a criminal as evident. And that day, I realized, you know what? I've chosen the wrong path. The path that I thought I was on, clearly something about what I've chosen isn't good. And so one of the things that I wanted to share with you, because I was thinking about it this week and I was reminiscing about it, is that many of you in your lives, you've chosen a path, but the path you've chosen no longer serves you. The path you've chosen no longer fits the person who you are, the person who you want to become, right? And what I would share with you is, if that path is no longer working for you, go back. Even if it means going back to the bottom again. You know, one of the things that I'm always saying to people is that one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people don't get what they want in life is that a lot of people don't want to be seen to be starting small. Do you know, many of you will know I work in Tesco's now, right? It's not exactly from going from a job where I was an estate agent, buying my own house, had loads of money, traveling around the globe, all of this, to now going into a position where I'm working in Tesco's so that I can work on this Cassim motive, so that I can become a counsellor, all of this kind of stuff. In order to do that, I've had to go back down to the bottom of the chain so that I can build myself back up again with the right foundations, because part of the reasons why I messed up last time was because I rushed it. I just was so keen to leave school and become successful that what ended up happening was that I did anything to become successful. And some of you guys who are listening to me right now, in your pursuit to find love, in your pursuit to find where you belong, you've got into relationships that are not healthy for you, that no longer support you. You've been with somebody for like maybe even 6 or 7 years. But the issue is, when you got with them then, you didn't really have a full sense of who you were. And you've been together for like 7 years. The issue is you've matured in your in your thinking, in your philosophy. Everything about you has refined. You've become a better human being. And so the relationship that you're in now no longer serves you. And what I would say to you is, look, even though you're going to lose a 7-year investment, in the long run, it is better that you lose this now than it turn you into a cynical, horrible human being in the long run if you stay in it. Some of you guys have been in a job where the job isn't working. Some of you guys have been gambling. You've become a gambling addict. You've been on Sky Bet, you've been down the old casino, and that path that you've chosen, you've come to the realization, I've got thousands of pounds in there. I've got credit cards that are going through the roof. I've got payday loans that are going through the roof. I'm in my overdraft. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I almost don't even see that life is worth living. Do you know what I would share with you? Walk away from it. Go a different path. Yes, you may have to admit that you have a problem, that you're an addict. You may have to admit that you don't know how to handle money. But you know what? I encourage you to go that different path. Yes, you're going to be back again at the beginning. Yes, you're going to look like an idiot. Yes, you may have to do a really shit job. Yes, you may have to be single for a little while. Whatever it is that you have to do, my personal recommendation to you is, if it no longer serves you, if it no longer works, walk away from it. Go a different path. That's what I was thinking about as my second thing. The third thing that I wanted to share with you that I was journaling about is the importance of breaking the cycle and not carrying on the baton. So there's this really interesting woman that I was journaling about today, called, actually I was writing about her in my book. Her name is Terrara Trent. Terrara, I can't even say her name. Her name is Terrara Trent or something like that. And she was a woman who was raised in Rhodesia. And when she was raised there, she had come from a line of women who were in polygamous relationships. So she came from a line where her great grandmother was one of 6 wives that a man had. Then her grandmother was a woman, one of 5 different wives that a man had. And then her mother was came from a line of I think it was like three other wives that a man had. And one of the things that she really talks about is about the fact that every single one of her women in her family, every single one of them carried a baton and carried this negative cycle of illiteracy, having children at a young age, because this woman, Terrari, my apologies, I can't remember her name or how to pronounce it correctly. She, at the age of 18, had already had 4 children. And in fact, she actually miscarried. One of her children died because she was so young that she wasn't able to produce enough milk to give them the child the nutrients that she needed, right? Because she was just a little girl. And she talks about the fact that it is really, really important that every single one of us gets to a point in our lives where we look at the baton that we're carrying. Because her great-grandmother passed on the baton of illiteracy, of being in a polygamous relationship, of being a homestay wife, of never going after their dreams, of having children at a very young age. And her grandmother passed that on to, her great-grandmother passed it on to her grandmother. The grandmother then passed it on to the mother, and then the mother passed it on to Terry. And what I wanted to share with you, and is something that I was really thinking about, and is something that has become really, really, really important in my life, is to really look at some of the patterns and some of the curses and some of the batons that you have been carrying. Because one of the great things about life is, if there's been a curse in your family where every single one of your family members has lived in a council house, you've got to break that. And you have the power and the choice to break that if you so desire it. If there's been a curse in your family of people constantly living off benefits, of people constantly getting diabetes, it is your job, and you have the power to stop that. If every single one of the members of your family has got pregnant under the age of 20, going back all the way to your great-grandparents, it is your job to stop that. If nobody in your family, going back 3-4 generations, none of the men or the women have really ever followed their dreams, it is your job, if you so desire it, to actually stop that. You do not have to take the baton and give it to your children, and give it to your nephews, and give it to your neighbours. Every single one of us has a choice whether we carry on. Because what many of us don't actually realise, and I've constantly have to remind myself of this, is most of the things that people learn from us, they don't learn by us telling them, they learn from our behaviour. A lot of the things that I've learned as a human being, I've learned from my parents. And it's not that my parents have told me these things, it's because I've observed the way that they are. And what I would share with you is, a lot of you guys who are listening to me, you've picked up things, patterns, attitudes, behaviours, philosophies that were handed to you without your permission. They were just given to you at age 5 or 6 years of age. They were given to you, and you just kind of today just think, well, that is the way life is. That is the way things have always been, right? And what I'm here to do and ask you to really think about is, I ask you to challenge some of those and ask you, are they really benefiting you in your life? Are they really of use? Okay, fine. There's been a history of your family members all getting diabetes. My question to you is, does you getting diabetes now, is that a guarantee, or are there some things that you can do to limit the chances of you getting diabetes? If every single one of the men in your families have had cancer, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get cancer. And what I'm saying is that so many people, if we've come from that background, if we come from that heritage and we've been handed that baton, not that we've even wanted it, but when there's been a president where every single member of our male household maybe has become bald, like lost their hair, or they've had cancer, many of us just assume, we just get given this baton and we just presume that that is the way our life has to be as well. But I have found that we can make different choices, and that we can actually decide to end the pattern, end the cycle, end the curse with us. Let me share with you one of the curses that I decided I was going to end. One of the curses that I decided I was going to end with me is that I was going to end this cycle of always starting from the bottom. I wanted to ensure that before I die, my children do not get to a point where they have to start with nothing. It's ridiculous, right? I want my children to take what I've built, take what I've started off, and take it to a completely different level. This doesn't mean that I want them to be entitled, right? But this constant system of always starting from absolutely nothing is ridiculous, right? And I know that many of you who are listening to me will say, well, Cassim, yeah, but if you give the children too much, then they're going to become entitled, then they're going to become spoiled. They only become spoiled if you don't give them the values that you stood for. If you don't strike the right balance between them working hard, them understanding how much things cost, right? Kids don't become spoiled or entitled because they choose to. It's because usually the parents allow them to. Don't attack me. That's just the truth. So what I've decided is that has to stop with me. You know, there is a history of black people in my family having high blood pressure, having diabetes. I said that has to stop with me. This is ridiculous. This is something which we know we can reduce by our lifestyle. So I was like, I've got to cut that out. I don't want to join that cycle as well and carry that onto my children so my children pick it up. So that's the three things that I wanted to share with you. I don't know whether they've been of any use or not. I don't know whether they've prompted something for you to think about in your own life. But I you know, you guys know that the whole point of this journal entries isn't really for me to share these my ideas with you to impart them onto you. It's really for you, for what I share with you to be a trigger for you to think about your own life, your own philosophies, your own tactics, your own stories, your own patterns, to think about your own life and what you believe and what you stand for, and think about how you want the world to be. And that's, you know, that's the gift that I really want you to use your life to do. You know, you may not be rich, you may not be famous, but what you definitely can do is that you can use your life to better the next generation. Whether you use that through your stories, whether you use that through your experience or a skill or a tactic or some of the knowledge that you have. What I challenge you to do is get a journal for yourself. These journals, guys, cost about £3 on Amazon and eBay, even less than that. Get a journal. Start writing down what you believe in, what you stand for. How do you believe that the world should be? What is success? What is failure? What is happiness? What is joy? What does it mean to be joyful? What does a good life mean? Define that. What does that look like? Something for you to think about. So, again, if you like what I share with you guys, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, Cassim on YouTube. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I shall speak to you soon. Bye for now.